Welcome everyone, and thank you for being here today. I am excited to introduce our presentation on the KIAR course, version 2. Today, we'll be focusing on anti-corruption, integrity, and building a generation with dignity, integrity, and a commitment to a corruption-free future. This program is proudly brought to you by the Ministry of Higher Education. Over the course of this presentation, we'll explore the key concepts, strategies, and our shared vision for fostering ethical behavior and transparency among students and future leaders. Let's get started. Let's take a closer look at the module on corruption offenses according to the MACC Act 2009. This slide serves as an overview of the legal framework that defines and addresses corruption. The MACC Act 2009 is the key legislation that guides how corruption is handled in Malaysia. It outlines specific offenses related to corruption, providing clear definitions and penalties. Understanding these offenses is crucial because it helps us recognize what behaviors are considered illegal and how the law aims to combat corruption effectively. As we progress through this presentation, keep in mind that this legal foundation underpins all anti-corruption efforts and reinforces the importance of integrity and transparency in public and private sectors. Now, let's take a closer look at how various international organizations define corruption. As you'll see, each of these definitions highlights different aspects of the issue, but they all center around the core idea of abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. When we talk about corruption, we're referring to actions that undermine trust, fairness, and integrity in both public and private sectors. It's important to understand these definitions because they help us recognize the many forms corruption can take and why it's such a critical challenge to address globally. By understanding how these organizations see corruption, we can better appreciate the importance of our collective efforts to combat it and strengthen good governance worldwide. Today, I want to focus on a key aspect of corruption, which is receiving or giving gratification, often referred to as a bribe. This involves offering or accepting something of value in exchange for doing something related to one's official duties. Essentially, it's about using one's position or authority to gain personal benefit, which can distort decision-making and undermine trust in public institutions. This act can be subtle or overt, but either way, it compromises integrity and hampers fair governance. Understanding this behavior is crucial because it directly affects the integrity of the entire system, and addressing it is vital for promoting transparency and accountability. Remember, corruption in this form not only affects individual integrity, but also erodes public confidence in the institutions meant to serve us all. Let's take a closer look at corruption. Often, we think of it as just giving or receiving bribes, but it's actually much broader than that. Corruption doesn't only involve those exchanges of gratification. According to the MACC Act 2009, there are various offenses that fall under the umbrella of corruption. These include acts like abuse of power, embezzlement, and even getting involved in activities that compromise integrity. Understanding these different aspects helps us see that corruption can manifest in many forms, and it's important to recognize all of them to effectively combat this issue. So, as we move forward, keep in mind that corruption is a complex problem, and addressing it requires a comprehensive approach that goes beyond just bribery. Let's take a closer look at some key aspects of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009 related to offering or giving bribes. Firstly, under Section 17(b), the Act addresses the abuse of a public position for gratification. This means that if someone in a public role uses their authority or position to receive personal benefits, it's a serious offense. Next, we have Section 23, which deals with false claims. Making false claims involves submitting misleading or untruthful statements to gain undue advantage, and this is also criminalized under the Act. Moving on to Section 18, this covers soliciting or accepting bribes. Essentially, if anyone asks for or accepts a bribe in connection with their official duties, they are committing an offense. Finally, Sections 16(a) and 17(a) focus on the act of offering or giving bribes. These sections highlight that offering or giving anything of value to influence a decision or gain an unfair advantage is a violation of the law. Throughout this presentation, the common thread is that these provisions aim to promote integrity and transparency in public service by clearly defining and penalizing corrupt practices. Understanding these sections helps us recognize the importance of ethical conduct and the consequences of misconduct. Today, we're focusing on the definition of bribery. Essentially, it refers to any person who solicits or accepts gratification, which is essentially a bribe. This gratification acts as an inducement, meaning it's a kind of encouragement or motivation. The purpose of this inducement is to influence that person's actions, either to do something or to refrain from doing something. It's important to understand that bribery involves both asking for and accepting these benefits. Whether you're the one offering the bribe or the one receiving it, both are considered part of this unethical behavior. This concept ties into the overall theme of integrity and ethical conduct, because such acts undermine fairness and transparency in any system, whether in public service, business, or other areas. Recognizing these actions is crucial for maintaining trust and accountability in our institutions. On this slide, we see an example of corruption involving a policeman who accepted a bribe of Rm 200. This was in exchange for releasing an unmarried couple who had been arrested. The officer was fined Rm 1500, or alternatively, he could face 1 month of imprisonment. This incident took place in Ipoh on March 30, 2022, when the officer pleaded guilty in the Ipoh Sessions Court. The key point here is that the officer accepted a bribe in connection with his official duties, which is a serious offense. The bribe was offered to avoid taking action against the couple, who were arrested on September 30, 2019, for being together in a suspicious manner in a secluded area. The actual act of accepting the bribe happened between approximately 12:30 and 12:45 in the afternoon, behind a restaurant in Taman Fair Park, Kinta District, on January 5, 2020. This example highlights the importance of integrity and accountability within law enforcement. Accepting a bribe not only compromises individual ethics, but also erodes public trust in the justice system. Such cases serve as a reminder of the consequences of corruption and the need for vigilance in upholding the law. In this case, we see a clear example of corruption involving a deputy director of Perbadanan Putrajaya. He received a return flight ticket from Kuala Lumpur to London, worth Rm 3022, from a contractor. Now, at first glance, that might seem like a simple gift, but it was actually part of a larger issue. The ticket was given as an inducement to secure a maintenance project for Taman Putra Perdana in Putrajaya, valued at over Rm 35 million. This kind of behavior undermines fair competition and public trust. The situation came to light, and on March 28, 2012, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined Rm 15110. This case highlights how abuse of power for personal gain can lead to serious legal consequences. It also underscores the importance of integrity and transparency in public service, themes that resonate throughout our presentation. Such instances serve as stark reminders that corruption not only damages the reputation of individuals, but also erodes public confidence in government institutions. On June 24, 2015, in Putrajaya, the Court of Appeals made a significant ruling. They ordered a former Siaraya High Court judge to serve a 6-year prison sentence for 7 counts of bribery. Along with that, he was fined Rm 210000, which is equivalent to about 42 months imprisonment if paid instead of jail time. This judge received a bribe of Rm 13000. The purposes of this bribe were twofold. First, to lighten the sentence of a Siari offender and facilitate their release from court bail, and second, to approve polygamy applications. What makes this case particularly noteworthy is that he is the first Siaraya High Court judge to be jailed for corruption. This highlights that no one is above the law, regardless of their position, and underscores the importance of integrity within our judicial system. This case ties into our overall theme of promoting transparency and accountability in religious and legal institutions. It's a reminder that corruption can happen anywhere, and it's vital that we remain vigilant and committed to upholding justice. On July 3, 2014, in Ipoh, a mathematics lecturer was sentenced by the court to 1 day's imprisonment and a fine of Rm 25000. This case involved him being found guilty on 5 counts of corruption. Essentially, he accepted gratifications totaling Rm 1130 in order to increase the marks of 2 students in mathematics and statistics. This happened during the years 2011 and 2012. What's important here is to recognize how corruption like this undermines the integrity of our educational system. When educators accept bribes to manipulate marks, it not only affects the fairness of assessments, but also diminishes trust in academic institutions. This case highlights the serious consequences of such actions, both legally and ethically. It ties into the bigger picture of maintaining integrity and transparency in education, which is crucial for nurturing honest and capable individuals. Today, I want to highlight a serious issue involving integrity and corruption within our education system. On this slide, we see an example of a headmaster who solicited a bribe from a canteen operator. This incident took place in Shah Alam on February 6, 2017. The headmaster was found guilty of 2 counts of corruption and was sentenced to 8 months in prison. What exactly happened? He received Rm 4400 from the canteen operator. The offenses occurred on 2 different dates, January 30 and October 2014. The purpose of the bribe was to secure a support letter that would help extend the canteen contract at his school. This kind of behavior is a clear violation of Section 165 of the Penal Code, which addresses corruption offenses. It's important because it shows how abuse of power for personal gain can undermine integrity and trust within our institutions. By understanding this case, we reinforce the importance of transparency and honesty, especially in roles that serve the public and influence young minds. This example ties back to our overall theme of promoting ethical conduct and fighting corruption at all levels. On 15 April 2018, a sales executive was caught in a scandal involving a bribe of Rm 11000. This bribe was given by an individual in exchange for a degree. But what makes this case particularly interesting is that the executive obtained a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Multimedia University, or MMU, without actually going through the proper learning process. Essentially, he paid for the degree without earning it legitimately. Then, about a year later, on 7 May 2019, the court sentenced him to 2 years in prison and imposed a fine of Rm 55000. Alternatively, if he chose not to pay the fine, he would serve an additional year in prison. This case highlights a very serious issue. Selling and buying academic degrees undermines the integrity of our educational system. It also raises questions about the value of genuine qualifications versus those obtained through illicit means. Throughout this presentation, we're emphasizing the importance of maintaining honesty and integrity in education and professional credentials. Because when integrity is compromised, it affects not just individuals, but the credibility of entire institutions and industries. Let's talk about offering or giving a bribe. This involves any person who offers or gives some kind of gratification to an agent or a public officer. The key thing to remember here is that this gratification is offered as an inducement. In other words, it's meant to persuade or influence the official to do something. And importantly, this act is related to their official duties. So, when someone tries to sway an officer's actions through gifts or favors, it's considered a bribe. This is a serious matter because it compromises integrity and fairness in public service. Understanding this helps us recognize how corruption can start and how vital it is to uphold transparency and honesty in all official dealings. On 19 February 2018, in Kuala Lumpur, a supplier of machinery and spare parts was sentenced to a month's imprisonment and fined Rm 10000. This case highlights the serious consequences of engaging in corrupt practices. The offense involved giving a bribe of Rm 1100 to a police officer during a raid at an entertainment center. Specifically, the accused, who tested positive for methamphetamine, attempted to bribe the officer to avoid taking a urine sample. He also wanted the officer to change the urine sample to tap water, which would be filled into the urine bottle. This incident occurred early in the morning, at around 1:3 a.m. on January 31, 2018, at Meridian Entertainment Center in Chiapas. The key takeaway here is that offering bribes to interfere with police procedures, especially during drug testing, is a serious offense. It not only undermines law enforcement efforts, but also perpetuates illegal activities. This case serves as a reminder that integrity and honesty are crucial, and attempting to manipulate the system through bribery can lead to significant legal penalties. It connects to our broader theme of upholding the rule of law and maintaining ethical standards in all our actions. Today, I want to highlight a case that underscores the seriousness of bribery within the construction industry. A construction contractor was sentenced to 3 months in jail and fined Rm 15000, or alternatively, 5 months in jail if he chose not to pay the fine. This case took place in Ipoh on August 19th. The key issue here is that he was caught giving Rm 3000 as a bribe to an enforcement officer from the Land and Mines Office. The purpose of this bribe was to prevent the officer from taking action against his company, which was producing stone without the necessary permits. This example demonstrates how corrupt practices, like offering bribes, not only lead to legal consequences, but also tarnish the integrity of the industry. It ties back to our overall message about the importance of compliance and ethical conduct in construction and related sectors. Remember, integrity is fundamental to sustainable growth and trust in our industry. On this slide, we see an example of a serious offense related to immigration enforcement. In Kuching, on August 9, 2016, a trader was sentenced to 1 day in prison and fined Rm 10000. The reason? He was caught giving a bribe of Rm 610 to a senior immigration officer. This was an attempt to influence the officer not to take action against him for lacking a valid work permit. Specifically, it involved violating Section 55B(1) of the Immigration Act of 1959 and 1963. This case highlights how bribery is used as a corrupt shortcut to avoid legal consequences. It also underscores the importance of following proper immigration procedures and the risks of attempting to circumvent the law through illegal payments. Remember, such actions not only have legal repercussions, but also damage integrity and trust in the immigration system. This example ties into our overall theme of maintaining lawful conduct and the serious consequences of corruption. On the 16th of February, 2009, in Sungai Petani, a young man faced legal consequences for an attempt to bribe a policeman. He was fined Rm 500 by the Sessions Court. Now, this young man, who was 30 years old at the time, pleaded guilty to trying to bribe a police officer with Rm 50. The incident took place in Baling Town on September 13, 2006. The reason behind his attempt was to avoid legal action for riding a motorcycle without a license. This case highlights the seriousness with which bribery is treated under the law, regardless of the amount involved. It also underscores the importance of integrity and following proper procedures when dealing with law enforcement. Ultimately, this serves as a reminder that attempting to bribe officials can lead to significant penalties, reinforcing the message that honesty is always the best approach. So, if you are ever offered a bribe, what should you do? Well, first and foremost, it's important to recognize that accepting a bribe is not an option. It's unethical and can have serious legal consequences. Instead, you should firmly decline the offer, making it clear that you do not and will not accept any form of bribery. Next, it's crucial to report the incident to the appropriate authorities or your organization's compliance department. This helps to maintain integrity within your organization and upholds the standards of transparency and honesty that we're emphasizing throughout this presentation. Remember, standing firm against bribery not only protects you personally, but also supports a culture of ethical behavior in your workplace and industry. It's about reinforcing the message that integrity matters and that corruption has no place in our professional lives. Now, let's talk about a serious issue that can really undermine our integrity. Any persons who use or submit claims, documents, containing false details with the intention to deceive their office. This kind of behavior is not just about making a mistake. It's about deliberately providing incorrect information to gain an unfair advantage. When someone submits a false claim, they're essentially trying to deceive the system and manipulate the process for personal benefit. It's important to recognize that such actions can have serious consequences, both legally and professionally. Upholding honesty and accuracy in all claim submissions is essential to maintaining trust and integrity within our organization. Remember, the overall goal is to ensure transparency and fairness in everything we do, so we must be vigilant against any attempts to falsify information. Let's look at some common examples of offenses to understand what they entail. First, we have Mr. A, an employee at Organization X in this case. Mr. A demanded overtime work from his employer despite the fact that the work was not actually carried out. This is an example of misconduct because it involves making a false demand for work that wasn't performed. Next, consider Mr. A being ordered to work outside his usual area. He lives at a friend's house, and after completing the assigned task, he purchased a hotel receipt from Y to make a claim to his employer. This situation highlights how submitting false or fabricated receipts can be an offense, especially when used to support claims that are not legitimate. Third, we see Mr. A buying a sick leave certificate from Z's clinic to justify his absence from work. The certificate was then submitted to his employer. This example shows the offense of submitting a fake medical document to gain time off, which is a serious breach of trust. Finally, Mr. A certified the supply of spare parts for printing machines, even though the actual supply had not taken place. This kind of falsification involves certifying that work has been done or goods supplied when, in reality, it has not. These examples are important because they illustrate different ways in which misconduct or offenses can occur in the workplace. Recognizing these helps us understand what behaviors to look out for and prevent, aligning with our overall goal of maintaining integrity and accountability. In this case, a contractor faced serious legal consequences for making a false claim. He was charged at the Butterworth Sessions Court for claiming payment for a 405-meter fence, which was supposed to cost Rm 1132380. However, the actual length of the fence he constructed was only 162.2 meters. This discrepancy highlights a clear case of dishonesty and abuse of the procurement process. On 7 October 2011, both the contractor and a JKR technician were found guilty of this misconduct. They received a sentence of 4 years, imprisonment, and a hefty fine of Rm 144,709.65. This example underscores the importance of integrity and transparency in project management and procurement. Any false claims can lead to severe legal consequences, damaging reputations and wasting public resources. It reminds us that accountability is vital to maintaining trust and ensuring that public funds are used appropriately. Today, I want to highlight a significant case involving a university dean who was sentenced to prison. The dean endorsed the supply of multi-joint 2 AP equipment, which was valued at Rm 138600. However, what was actually sent was a different product, the multi-hip equipment, which only cost Rm 27965. This discrepancy raises important questions about transparency and integrity in procurement processes. On 30 January 2012, the dean was sentenced to 1 year's imprisonment and a fine of Rm 100,000. This case underscores the serious consequences that can arise from misconduct and highlights the importance of ethical practices, especially within academic institutions. It's a stark reminder that accountability is crucial in maintaining trust and integrity in our systems. On this slide, we see the involvement of the manager and CEO of MARA Education Foundation in a serious misconduct. They conspired to make false claims about program endorsements. Specifically, 2 senior officers of YPM endorsed 9 programs titled Kesemerlangan Ilmu dan Sasaya Diri Murid for the Perak Education Department. However, the key issue here is that none of these programs were actually implemented. Each of these endorsed programs was valued at Rm 33850, which totals up to Rm 304650. That's a significant amount of money based on false claims. Now, on September 6, 2013, the YPM CEO pleaded guilty to these charges. He was sentenced to just 1 day in prison and a hefty fine of Rm 300000. This case highlights the importance of transparency and integrity in managing public funds. It also ties into our overall theme of accountability within organizational governance. On the 22nd of September, 2016, a case involving claiming salary for non-existent employees came to light. The branch manager of Keselamatan Cisco, which is part of M0 SDN BHD in Perak, was charged with making false claims. Specifically, they submitted claims for salary and overtime amounting to over Rm 40000. What's particularly concerning is that these claims were made under the name of an individual who never actually worked for the company. The period covered by these false claims was from January 1, 2012, all the way through December 31, 2012. When brought to justice, the accused pleaded guilty. As a result, they were sentenced to 18 months in prison and fined Rm 200106. This case highlights how fraudulent claims not only breach trust, but also lead to serious legal consequences. It ties into our broader theme of integrity and accountability in financial management, reminding us of the importance of vigilance and honesty in the workplace. On this slide, we see an example of false claims related to personal beauty treatments. The Senior General Manager of Malaysia Airports Holdings Berhad, or MAHB, pleaded guilty to 3 counts of submitting false claims totaling Rm 15580. Now, these claims were made using a credit card that was actually meant for official MAHB expenses. Instead of using it for work-related costs, the accused used the card for personal reasons, specifically for skincare treatments and body slimming. This case was heard in the Shah Alam Sessions Court on January 4, 2018, where the court sentenced the individual to a fine of Rm 46800. What this highlights for us is the importance of integrity and honesty in expense claims. Misusing company resources not only breaches trust, but can also lead to serious legal consequences. It ties into our overall theme of maintaining ethical standards and transparency in the workplace. On the 3rd of November, 2009, the Teratai ADUN and his assistant submitted 7 false claims for community programs, claiming these were in conjunction with Chinese New Year and Taipusam celebrations. However, in reality, these programs were never actually carried out. This is a clear case of misappropriation of public funds, where resources meant for community development were falsely claimed for personal or improper use. Both the ADUN and his assistant were found guilty of this misconduct. They were sentenced to 2 years imprisonment and a fine of 50,000 ringgit for each charge. Then, on the 29th of November, 2016, the Court of Appeal upheld their conviction, confirming that justice had been served. This case highlights the serious consequences of misusing public allocations and reinforces the importance of integrity and accountability in managing community resources. It also ties into our broader theme of transparency and ethical governance, reminding us all of the need to uphold public trust. Now let's look at slide 28. Here, we're talking about abuse of power by a public officer. Essentially, this occurs when a public officer uses their position to make decisions or take actions on matters where they, their relatives, or their associates have a personal interest. It's a serious breach of ethical conduct because it compromises fairness and integrity in public service. What's important to note is that this isn't just about making a wrong decision. It's about using one's official power for personal gain or to benefit someone close to them. This kind of abuse undermines public trust and can lead to unfair advantages, corruption, and a loss of confidence in government institutions. Throughout this presentation, we're emphasizing the importance of transparency, accountability, and integrity in public service. Recognizing and preventing abuse of power is vital to maintaining the credibility of public officials and ensuring that decisions are made based on merit and fairness, not personal interests. Now, let's look at a couple of examples that illustrate what we mean by an offense in this context. First, imagine a situation where the head of a government department approves a project that benefits his own son's company. This is a clear conflict of interest, where personal relationships influence official decisions, potentially leading to corruption or unfair advantage. Secondly, consider a scenario where a project director, who is a general licensee company or GLC, decides to select a tender from a company owned by his sibling. Again, this is an offense because it involves nepotism and abuse of power, undermining fairness and transparency in procurement processes. These examples highlight how personal interests, when prioritized over duty, can lead to serious ethical violations and legal breaches. They connect directly to our overall theme of maintaining integrity and accountability in public and corporate governance. Recognizing these offenses is crucial because it helps us understand the importance of upholding principles of fairness and avoiding conflicts of interest. By doing so, we protect the integrity of our institutions and ensure trust in our decision-making processes. On January 9, 2017, a husband and wife who were both lecturers at Padang Terap Community College were found guilty of abuse of power. The wife was involved in preparing a local order for the supply of electrical equipment spare parts, worth Rm 34250.25, to a company owned by her sibling. Meanwhile, the husband endorsed this local order, which shows how they both played roles in this misconduct. In terms of their sentences, the husband received a one-day prison sentence along with a fine of Rm 1702.5125. The wife, on the other hand, was given a different kind of sentence. She was placed under good behavior for 3 years, with a guarantor to ensure she complies. These cases highlight the importance of integrity and accountability in public service roles. Even though they were both involved, the sentences reflect their different levels of responsibility and involvement. This example ties into the broader theme of our presentation about the importance of ethical conduct and the consequences of abuse of power. Today, I want to highlight a case that underscores the serious consequences of abuse of power in public service. In 2016, in Georgetown, a Pulau Pinang Education Department officer was charged with misconduct dating back to around 2013. Specifically, he endorsed a payment voucher worth over Rm 26000 to a company called Syarikat Nur Asin Maju Enterprise, which was supplying lab coats to school assistants across Pulau Pinang. What's particularly concerning here is that the officer was found to have an interest in that company, which indicates a conflict of interest and abuse of his position. Additionally, he was charged with accepting nearly Rm 25000 from an individual who had official dealings with him. These actions violate principles of integrity and transparency that are fundamental in public service. The legal proceedings concluded in 2019, when the High Court upheld a sentence of 5 years, imprisonment, and a hefty fine of Rm 130.81250. This case vividly illustrates the serious repercussions of abusing authority, both legally and ethically, and ties into our broader discussion about maintaining integrity and accountability in government roles. Di slide inai. Kita melihat satu kanto yang cukup serius berkaitan dengan penyalahgunaan kuasa oleh seorang penjatua. Penjatua di SMK Perempuan Raja Zarina di Pelabuhan Klang Tela, menyalahgunakan kedudukannya dengan melantik, syarikat sendiri untuk mendapatkan kontrak. Yang pertama, dia memilih syarakatnya sendiri untuk membekalkan bahan pengajaran bernilai lebih daripada 2.000 ringgit. tepatnya RM 209165. Selene itu, dia juga melantik syarakatnya untuk membacakan peralatan, dan alat-tulis bernilai RM 4500. Ini jelas menunjukkan adanya konflik kepentingan dan penyalahgunaan kuasa. Pada 27 Juli 2017, dia telah dihukum penjara selama 9 bulan dan denda sebanyak RM 40500. Kejadian ini amat penting karena ia menegaskan bahwa penyalahgunaan kuasa dalam jawatan tertinggi tidak akan dibiarkan dan akan dikenakan tindakan tegas. Ia juga mengingatkan kita semua tentang pentingnya integriti dan ketulusan dalam pengurusan sekolah dan institusi awam. On January 5, 1991, in Kota Kinabalu, a significant event took place involving the Chief Minister of Sabah. He was charged with abusing his absolute power, which is a serious breach of ethical governance. Specifically, he approved a development project in Tambanan that was worth nearly RM 15 million. What made this case particularly noteworthy was that the project was awarded to companies owned by his two in-laws. This raises questions about conflicts of interest and the misuse of power for personal gain. Ultimately, he was found guilty and fined RM 1800. This case highlights how the abuse of authority, especially when it involves family connections, can undermine public trust and integrity. It also emphasizes the importance of accountability and transparency in leadership, themes that run throughout our discussion on governance and corruption. On this slide, I want to highlight a significant case involving a Malacca Exco member. In 1997, this Exco was involved in a meeting where they approved a land application for a company called Ivory Height SDN, BHD. Now, what's crucial here is that this approval was part of an official meeting, but it was later revealed that the Exco member did not declare any personal interest in the matter. Interestingly, the company in question actually belonged to him, but he had it under someone else's name, what we call a proxy, to hide his involvement. After these events, he received RM 500000 when the company and the land, which was given by the government, were sold off. This case led to legal action. He was prosecuted for his role in the approval process, and ultimately, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison and fined RM 20000. This example underscores the importance of transparency and declaration of personal interests in official decisions, and it ties into our broader discussion on governance and integrity. It shows how failure to uphold these principles can lead to serious legal consequences and damage public trust. So, imagine a situation where a family member applies for a project at your workplace. What should you do in that case? Well, first and foremost, it's important to recognize that this situation can create potential conflicts of interest or even perceptions of favoritism. That's why, as professionals, we need to handle it carefully. The key is to maintain transparency and adhere to your organization's policies. You should disclose the relationship to your supervisor or the relevant authority, so they are aware of the connection. It's also crucial to avoid being involved in the decision-making process related to that project. This helps ensure fairness and uphold integrity. Remember, the overall goal is to prevent any appearance of bias and to maintain trust, both within your team and with external stakeholders. So, when such situations arise, clear communication and following established procedures are essential steps to handle them responsibly. Now, let's look at the penalties involved. If someone is found guilty of corruption, the fine can be up to 5 times the value of the gratification received, or RM 10000, whichever is higher. This means that the law aims to impose significant financial consequences to deter corrupt practices. Moving on to the criminal penalties, if an individual is convicted, they can face imprisonment for a period not exceeding 20 years. This highlights the seriousness with which corruption is treated here. Together, these measures serve as a strong deterrent, emphasizing that corruption is a grave offense with substantial consequences. It's important to understand that these penalties are designed to uphold integrity and ensure accountability across all levels. Let's talk about seized and forfeited assets today, specifically the proceeds from corruption. When authorities identify assets that are connected to corrupt activities, they can seize them, meaning they take control of these assets legally. If the situation warrants, these assets can then be forfeited, which means they are permanently taken away from the wrongdoer and transferred to the government or relevant authority. This process is a crucial tool in fighting corruption because it deprives corrupt individuals of the gains they've illicitly accumulated. The proceeds from corruption, such as money, property, or other assets, are essentially stolen resources that rightfully belong to the public. By seizing and forfeiting these assets, we not only punish the wrongdoer, but also recover resources that can be redirected toward development or public welfare. This concept ties into our overall theme of combating corruption by showing how legal mechanisms can be used to dismantle corrupt networks and restore integrity to public resources. It's a vital part of creating a deterrent effect and promoting accountability. Let's take a closer look at the statistics of seizure and forfeiture by Macc from 2015 to 2020. As you can see, the amounts involved have fluctuated quite a bit over these years. In 2015, the seizures amounted to about Rm2227 million, which then jumped significantly in 2016 to Rm30615 million, and further increased in 2017 to Rm35306 million. However, the most remarkable increase came in 2018, with seizures reaching over Rm27 billion. This sharp rise indicates a substantial escalation in enforcement activities, or possibly in the scale of the crimes being tackled. Moving on to 2019, the seizures dropped back down to Rm6083 million, but then in 2020, they surged again to nearly Rm1 billion, specifically Rm99938 million. When we look at forfeitures, a similar pattern emerges. From Rm394 million in 2015, we saw a steady increase over the years, culminating in Rm1285 billion in 2019. Remarkably, in 2020, forfeitures skyrocketed to Rm14332 billion. This dramatic growth in forfeitures, especially in 2019 and 2020, underscores the increasing effectiveness or focus of Macc's efforts to confiscate assets linked to corruption and illegal activities. These figures reflect not just the scale of illicit activities, but also the evolving strategies in asset recovery. These statistics are crucial because they demonstrate both the challenges and the progress in our ongoing fight against corruption. Let's talk about transactions that stem from corruption. When corruption occurs, it often leads to financial transactions that are designed to hide the illicit origins of money. A common crime associated with this process is money laundering. Money laundering involves disguising the true source of illegally obtained funds so they appear legitimate. This is a key point because it undermines the integrity of financial systems and can fund further criminal activities. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how corruption and financial crimes are interconnected, and understanding money laundering is crucial to combating these issues effectively. Let's take a moment to look at this illustration. As you can see, it visually represents the key concepts we've been discussing. The main points here highlight how different factors interact within the system. Notice how the arrows indicate relationships and flow, which helps us understand the dynamics at play. This illustration ties directly into our overall theme of how interconnected elements influence outcomes. By visualizing these connections, it becomes clearer how small changes can have significant impacts. So, keep this in mind as you consider how these components work together in the bigger picture. If convicted of money laundering under Section 4(1) of the AML-ATF-PUAA 2001, the consequences can be quite severe. The law stipulates that the offender faces a fine that can be up to 5 times the value of the proceeds from unlawful activities or Rm5 million, whichever is higher. This means that if the laundered amount is substantial, the fine can be significantly hefty. Additionally, imprisonment can extend up to 15 years, depending on the severity of the offense. These penalties highlight the seriousness with which the law treats money laundering, emphasizing the importance of compliance and the risks involved in such illegal activities. Remember, these measures are in place to protect the integrity of our financial system and prevent the misuse of funds obtained unlawfully. So, how does a gift turn into a bribe? Well, it all comes down to the context and the intention behind giving and receiving. Gifts are often seen as gestures of appreciation or goodwill, but when they are given with the expectation of influence or a favor in return, that's when they can cross the line into bribery. It's important to recognize that giving and receiving are natural parts of relationships, but they need to be transparent and appropriate. If a gift is offered to sway someone's decision or to secure an advantage, it ceases to be a simple gesture and becomes a tool for influence. This is why understanding the boundaries of giving and receiving is crucial, especially in professional or official settings. Remember, the key is whether the gift is meant to genuinely express gratitude or if it's intended to manipulate. Connecting this to our overall theme, it highlights how easily well-intentioned actions can become problematic when the underlying motives are questionable. Remember, this is a crucial point for all of us as public officers. Never accept a valuable gift or item from contractors or suppliers who are dealing with us officially. These gifts might seem harmless at first, but they can create conflicts of interest or even lead to perceptions of impropriety. It's important to maintain transparency and integrity in our dealings. By refusing such gifts, we uphold the trust placed in us by the public and ensure our actions are always above reproach. Keep this in mind as part of our commitment to ethical conduct and the overall integrity of our service. Now, let's look at Section 165 of the Penal Code. This section addresses a specific misconduct by public servants. Essentially, it states that if a public servant accepts any valuable thing without adequate consideration from someone they have official connections with, this is considered an offense. The key point here is that accepting gifts or valuable items without proper justification can lead to serious consequences. The law aims to prevent corruption and ensure integrity in public service. If found guilty under this section, the penalty can be 2 years imprisonment, a fine, or both. It's important to note that this is not just about accepting gifts, but accepting anything of value without proper consideration from parties linked to official duties. This connects to our overall theme of maintaining transparency and ethical conduct in public service. It reminds us that public trust depends heavily on the integrity of those in office, and breaches like this can undermine that trust. Pada Slide and I. Kita Melihat Service Circular No. 3 Tahun 1998, Yang Menegaskan Bawa Pemberi dan Penerima Hadiah Memiliki, Hubungan Resmi. Inai penting karena menunjukkan adanya hubungan formal yang harus diperhatikan. Selanjutnya, kita harus sadar bahwa pemberian hadiah dapat mempengaruhi keputusan yang akan diambil oleh penerima. Artinya, jika hadiah tersebut diberikan dengan maksud memengaruhi, itu bisa menjadi bentuk suap atau gratifikasi yang tidak sesuai aturan. Perlu diingat, saat hadiah tersebut berubah menjadi suap, itu sudah tidak lagi murni sebagai hadiah. Di sinilah perbedaan pentingnya, karena niat dan konteks pemberian hadiah sangat menentukan apakah itu sah atau tidak. Selain itu, satu poin kunci adalah nilai hadiah yang tidak seimbang atau tidak proporsional dengan keadaan. Jika hadiah yang diberikan jauh melebihi nilai yang wajar, inai bisa menimbulkan keraguan dan menandakan adanya niat tertentu di baliknya. Keseluruhan, poin-poin inai mengingatkan kita bahwa dalam hubungan resmi dan pemberian hadiah, integritas dan niat harus tetap dijaga. Karena, pada akhirnya, kita ingin memastikan bahwa semua tindakan tetap sesuai dengan etika dan aturan yang berlaku. Let's take a moment to recap the key points we've covered. Throughout this presentation, we've emphasized how understanding the core concepts is essential for effective implementation. We've discussed the importance of aligning strategies with overall goals, ensuring that every step we take contributes to our larger vision. Remember, the most successful approaches are those that are adaptable and grounded in a solid foundation of knowledge. By connecting these ideas, we can see how each piece fits into the bigger picture, reinforcing our overall theme of strategic growth and continuous improvement. On this slide, we're focusing on the main offenses related to corruption as outlined in the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act 2009. The core idea here is that corruption involves offering or giving bribes, which is a key offense. Under Section 17(b), the law specifically addresses misuse of authority by public officers. This means that when public officials abuse their power for personal gain, they are committing a serious offense. Another important point is false claims, covered under Section 23. This involves making false or exaggerated claims, often related to financial or administrative matters, which can also be classified as corrupt practices. Then we have Sections 18 and 16(a) and 17(a). Section 18 deals with asking for or accepting bribes, so when someone solicits a bribe or takes one, they are committing an offense under the law. Meanwhile, Sections 16(a) and 17(a) focus on the act of offering or giving bribes, emphasizing that both giving and accepting bribes are criminal acts. Understanding these sections helps us see the broader picture. Corruption is not just about the act of bribery itself, but also about misuse of authority and dishonesty in claims. These laws aim to cover all aspects of corrupt behavior, reinforcing the importance of integrity and accountability in public service. This aligns with our overall goal of promoting transparency and fighting corruption at all levels. Let's take a moment to focus on the activity itself. This slide is all about engaging you actively in the learning process. When we talk about activity, we're emphasizing the importance of applying concepts rather than just passively absorbing information. It's about practicing skills, discussing ideas, and reflecting on what we've learned so far. The key points here are that activities help solidify understanding, increase retention, and make the learning experience more interactive and enjoyable. By participating actively, you're more likely to connect the dots and see how these concepts fit into the bigger picture. Remember, this aligns perfectly with our overall theme of making learning practical and relevant. So, whether it's through group discussions, hands-on exercises, or real-world applications, engaging in these activities is crucial for deepening your mastery. Keep this in mind as you move forward. Your active participation is what turns knowledge into expertise. Now, let's move on to discussing Case Study 1. Here, we have Kiar, who is a supplier of office supplies and also a close friend of Dato' Aziz, the director of the administration division in a government department. Kiar regularly supplies office equipment to Dato' Aziz's department, which is an important detail to keep in mind. One day, during a lunch meeting at the PJ Hilton Hotel, Dato' Aziz mentioned his wife's wish to travel to London, but also shared that he lacked the necessary funds to make this trip happen. This sets the stage for the potential ethical issue. 2 days later, Kiar reached out and offered Dato' Aziz 2 tickets to London. Kiar claimed that these tickets were a gift, given purely as a gesture of friendship. Along with the tickets, Kiar also provided Rm5000 in pocket money for Dato' Aziz. Dato' Aziz accepted these gifts and proceeded to go on holiday with his wife in London. So the key questions here are, what wrongdoing has Dato' Aziz committed, and what actions should be taken in response? The most important concept to highlight is that accepting gifts of this nature from a supplier, especially one who does business with the department, can create a conflict of interest or appear as an undue influence. It raises questions about impartiality and integrity in public service. In terms of action, it's crucial to recognize that such gifts should be disclosed, and in many cases, declined to avoid any perception of favoritism or corruption. Dato' Aziz should have reported this gift according to the department's code of conduct, and possibly even refused it to maintain transparency and uphold ethical standards. This case ties back to our overall theme of maintaining integrity and ethical conduct in public service. It's a reminder that personal relationships and gifts can sometimes compromise professional responsibilities if not handled carefully. Now, let's move on to our discussion of Case Study 2. First, I want to ask, do you think Sarip has committed any corruption offense here? And what actions do you think should be taken by Sarip in this situation? Let's consider the possible effects of Sarip's actions as well. As background, Sarip is the head of department in a government department, which we'll refer to as XXX. His department was planning to purchase souvenirs for a program involving the minister, and they invited several companies to submit quotations. In total, 5 companies participated, with prices ranging from RM 88900 to RM 103000. The company chosen was LASDN, BHD, which offered the lowest price. However, there's a key point here. LALA is owned by Sarip's wife, Rahima. This raises questions about conflict of interest and whether proper procedures were followed during the selection process. Chaired the meeting, Sarip decided to select LALA, probably because of the lower price, but without disclosing his relationship. This scenario highlights the importance of transparency and fairness in procurement processes. It also prompts us to reflect on ethical standards and the potential for abuse of power if personal relationships influence decision-making. So, in your view, what should Sarip do now? And what are the possible consequences of his actions for the department and for himself? These points are crucial to understanding integrity in public service and maintaining public trust. Sekarang, mari kita bangkangkan kes inai yang melibatkan razid, seorang pensiun di college, asin yang terlibat dalam amalan rasuah. Dia meminta wang, sagakan daripada pelajarnya, yang ingin mendapatkan keputusan, semerlang dalam peperiksaan. Sagakan inai diterima dalam bentuk wang ringgit, serta barangan berharga lain seperti tiket perjalanan, hamper, dan hadiah. Apa yang menarik di sini adalah, razid bukan sahaja memperoleh wang dan barangan, tetapi dia juga memiliki rumah, kereta, dan barangan mewah sebagai hasil daripada rasuah inai. Sekarang, mari kita fikirkan, apakah kesan jangka pendek dan jangka panjang dari tindakan seperti inai? Dalam jangka pendek, tindakan inai dapat menyebabkan ketidakadilan dalam sistem pendidikan, di mana pelajar yang tidak berusaha keras mungkin mendapat keputusan yang baik hanya karena rasuah. Selain itu, ia boleh merusakan integriti institusi, pendidikan dan merusakan kepercayaan masyarakat terhadap sistem akademik. Dari segi jangka panjang, tentu saja, ia akan membawa impak yang lebih serius. Ia boleh menjejaskan budaya kerja dan nilai-nilai etika dalam masyarakat, serta menimbulkan sikap tidak amanah dan tidak bertanggung jawab. Lebih buruk lagi, ia boleh mendorong orang lain untuk mengikuti jejak yang sama, menyebabkan gelembang rasuah yang berleluasa. Kes inai juga menunjukkan bagaimana rasuah mampu memperkaya individu secara tidak sah, tetapi sebenarnya, ia merusakan maruah dan integriti diri serta institusi. Jadi, kita perlu sadar bahwa tindakan seperti inai tidak hanya memberi kesan kepada individu, tetapi juga kepada masyarakat dan negara secara keseluruhan. Inai adalah satu pengajaran pentingnya menegakkan integriti dan menolak rasuah dalam semua aspek kehidupan kita. This slide doesn't contain enough information. That's why we're moving to the next slide.